I am so delighted to present to our listeners today Mr. Marvin Blickenstaff, who is coming on the show. If you are a piano parent, this name may not be familiar to you, but piano teachers are familiar with Mr. Blickenstaff. So I want to first of all just welcome you, Marvin. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Tell us, first of all, just a little bit about you. Since I said some people may not be familiar with you, will you introduce yourself to us?
Well, my name is Marvin Blickenstaff. I grew up in Nampa, Idaho. Grandparents homesteaded in Idaho. They were Indiana farmers and they went out to Idaho, raised their family there. My father became a dentist in our hometown. And we were a family of five. I have two older brothers. They were wonderful athletes. I was not a great athlete. I played the piano.
Yes.
But they were very encouraging. They had high standards for us. It was a household of discipline. We were expected to do our best. And so if I was going to play the piano, I needed to excel in what I was doing. All of us were expected to get high grades at school. And so there was a standard of accomplishment in the household that I think has served me so well all my life. Second best was never acceptable. Yeah. Right. You were expected to attain your very best. And as a music student, that was just fantastic background. I think it's great. There was also a sort of a philosophy in our family that the good life was built on your giving to other people. Mm-hmm. Not for what my father said all the time, that the real meaning of life is not what you get for yourself, but what you give to other people. He did that in his dental practice. He gave so many free dental appointments to people who could not afford it, or to missionaries who were coming through town, or the ministers in town. He was a very giving person. My mother's whole life was giving, basically, to her family. I found that just a tremendous attitude to build a teaching career on, because a teacher gives. Yes. You're not in the teaching profession for what you get for yourself, but you give to other people. So absolutely. My family background was just a wonderful springboard to becoming a piano teacher.
Will you tell me, did all three of you study piano? Was that part of your growing up? How did you get into piano lessons?
In fact, my inspiration for taking piano was that my two older brothers were taking lessons, and I wanted to do what they were doing. Yeah. And they progressed at a normal rate of speed, but being so athletically talented, they dropped out of piano lessons when they got into junior high and high school. And I remember one time, when I was in the 7th grade, I announced to my mother that I thought it was time for me to stop piano lessons. And she looked at me in some amazement and she said, "Wait a second, you're doing so well. You read really well and you're playing advanced repertoire. Why would you want to stop?" And I said, "Well, my two older brothers stopped when they're in the 7th grade. Isn't that what Blickenstaffs do?" We quit piano in the 7th grade. And she said, "No, you're going to continue." Mm-hmm. And I said, "Well, I'm bored." And she said, thought a little bit, and she said, "I think I know how to fix that. I'll call Fern." Fern was the leading teacher in our town. In fact, she's probably the best teacher in the whole state of Idaho.
Oh, boy.
She was just within bicycle riding distance of my house. I could ride my bicycle to have piano lessons with Fern.
Wow.
So Fern opened up a slot for me in her studio, and the lessons were immediately so exciting, so demanding, and so revelatory that after about the 3rd lesson, I would have signed a contract with God Almighty that I was going to be a pianist.
Oh, wonderful.
It was just wonderful. She's very demanding, but very exciting. And the repertoire was exciting. She would enter me in competitions. And so there were outside goals for our study, etc. And I just sailed through junior high and high school piano lessons, won a bunch of competitions. And anyway, she was really the springboard for my whole lifetime in piano.
I love that story so much that you as a seventh grade wise, intelligent person decided that you had had enough of piano, but your wiser mother
Yeah, yeah,
didn't buy it.
that's right.
And I
That's
think that's such a good lesson for parents that are listening now. In my opinion, those middle school years is when a lot of students might decide that, okay, we've tried piano, let's move on to something else. And I'm sure it takes a wise parent to see the talent in their child. But rather than making things easier, your mother found a teacher that would actually challenge you more.
yeah, yeah.
That's wonderful.
But also part of that message from her was that I had ability that deserved more advanced training, and she wouldn't let me stop where I was. She said,
Yes.
"No, you're going to study with Fern." And that was probably one of the most important decisions that my parents made in my whole life, was
Wow.
that they didn't allow me to stop piano lessons. And look where I am now, Uh,
Absolutely.
yeah,
That's right.
85 years old and still teaching piano and still playing. I mean,
Yes.
it's just wonderful to be at this point in my life, and I can sit down and play a recital. I can illustrate for all my students. A lot of times my students' mouths drop open and they say, "Well, how do you know that piece?" And I said, "Oh, you can thank Fern for
There
that."
you go. I think you answered my next question a little bit earlier, just with your upbringing, with your family, that you always strive for excellence. But I like to ask people if you were a good student. I guess you would say yes, you were.
I think I was, but I'm not sure that had any kind of intrinsic. I I think that was just because I was so interested in the subject matter.
Mm,
I loved playing the piano.
hmm.
And I was pretty good at playing the piano, and so those two things, fed on each other. I think all of us invest in the things that we feel that we are good at,
Yes.
and so that served me very well.
Yes. Was there a piece of music that you felt like you learned to play as a student and like this, I am now a pianist. This is music rather than teaching pieces or
I remember before I went to Fern, my previous piano teacher had me play a recital, and I think I was in the sixth grade, maybe early seventh grade, but around that age when I was 12 years old. And on that recital, I remember I played the entire Beethoven Moonlight Sonata. Now everybody plays the first movement, but the last movement's really tough.
right.
So I played that. I think I played the Malagueña. I played the one of C sharp minor prelude.
Oh boy.
So that was pretty advanced repertoire for a 12-year-old. Oh, and on that same recital, our church had a new electric organ, and so I played several organ compositions.
Oh boy. Wow. I bet that was a great recital.
Yeah, well, that was fun.
Yes.
And I still remember that as sort of one of the high points of my grade school piano activity.
Yes. And so then your parents recognized that you needed to have someone that could help you advance even farther.
Yeah,
And through your middle school and high school years, you continued with Fern and had
yeah.
success in lots of competitions and festivals and events. And so then I would presume the next step is to go on to college. And then how did you centralize into teaching?
There's an interesting little interlude in that whole story, because my dad was a dentist, as I have said several times, and they were really not convinced that I should go into music as a life goal. It's fine that I could play the piano, but as
Right.
a profession, they had grave doubts about that. And I think one of the things they thought was that I would be a concert pianist and I would be traveling all over and I would not have time with my family, et cetera, et cetera. And so that did not mesh well with their idea of what a good life was, of solid family, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember, and so they were not very supportive of my majoring in music in college.
Right.
It's okay to be a high school pianist, but you better do something more practical as a college major.
Get a real job.
Yeah, get a. And I remember one time when I was a I was a senior in high school, and I entered a competition in the Pacific Northwest. The competition was held up in Montana, and I won the competition. So I came home with the prize under my belt, and it was a tri-state competition, and so that had some significance. And at the breakfast table the next morning, my dad looked up at my mother, put his fork down, and he said, "Mother, if Marvin wants to major in music, I think we'll let him."
Wow.
Now, that's a verbatim quote. I will never I'll never forget that statement. If Marvin wants to major in music, I think we'll let him. That statement also showed who wore the pants in that house. I mean,
Yes,
my
sir.
dad. I had to have the permission of my father to major in music, and he said, "I think we'll let him." That was just wonderful that they would give me their blessing that I should major in music. So eventually I made the decision to go to Oberlin in Ohio, applied, got basically a full scholarship, had a great time at Oberlin, and then went to Indiana University for a master's degree, and then went into teaching immediately.
Rather than the performance route, the
Oh, yeah.
concert pianist
Yeah, yeah.
route.
Well, the interesting thing about college teaching is that you can really do as much playing as you have time for.
Mm.
And I always made it a goal that I would play a solo faculty recital every year while I was teaching on the college level.
Wow.
Sometimes that might be a concerto, but usually it was a recital. And that really helped build my repertoire because I would try to learn a complete new recital, a recital of new repertoire every
Yes.
year.
Wow.
And I can think back over my repertoire and say, oh, yeah, that was for a North Carolina recital. This was for an Indiana recital.
Oh, sure, sure. I would
Yeah,
imagine it's like a filing cabinet of this,
exactly.
that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wonderful. I really admire what your dad, that he, I hate to say had to be convinced, but I'm sure he was wanting the best for you and a good
Precisely.
livelihood. And I
Right.
love that he was the one that made the decision. And then you could go off to school knowing you've got your family's blessing. Your parent has
Precisely.
given, your
Yeah.
father has approved of that. How would you say, well, I just think that's important for parents to hear these days. This is not even piano related, and I don't want to chase a large rabbit too far off course, but parents need to have permission to make decisions for their children. We need their expertise. Our children don't know, they don't have the
That-
life experience that we have. And so I'm glad to hear that story from your
yeah.
father.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Young people are like sheep, sort of wandering around, and they don't know really what the right path is. It really takes careful parenting to guide a student into correct paths, and to open up doors.
Yes.
Yeah, giving children the opportunity to try their wings, art or at drama or at music in the science field, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes, and then even going back to your mom, when our children feel like, oh, I can't do it anymore, then our parents can motivate us and encourage us to keep on going.
Yeah,
Don't give up
exactly.
too soon. That is so great. I wanted to ask you, you've been teaching a couple of years.
I, I think it tallies in about 65 now.
Wow, wow. I think I'm doing something I've been teaching for 30 years, but I'm
Yeah.
just a baby compared to you. Do you have any thoughts about how teaching has changed over the years? I know that's a can of worms, isn't it?
I think I think one of the things that one can say is that there are so many opportunities for teachers nowadays to become better educated.
Mm,
There are so many workshops and webinars and conferences, teacher organizations. So there's no question but what teachers nowadays are actually more educated and better equipped than in the old days. In the old days, we kind of taught the way we were taught.
yes.
We taught out of the old books that we were
Mhm.
taught. There are so many wonderful, wonderful opportunities to expand the repertoire, give our students excellent literature to study.
Yes.
So we're operating from a more well-informed platform right now in the teaching. So that's one of the biggest things I think that has changed. The repertoire choices are much wider because there's such a huge amount of repertoire choices, books to choose from.
Yeah.
And we have wonderful composers who have written very meaningful compositions for younger students. In a way, you could say there's no excuse for a student to be bored by the music that they're studying because there's so many choices.
Yes, yes. And if a child is bored with a particular piece, you can find something else that teaches a similar concept, but that might have a better connection.
Find 10 pieces that will teach it as
Yes.
well. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
I
that's
love what you said about there are so many opportunities for teachers. I think, in my opinion, a lot of teachers might be hesitant, maybe even to take some time off from teaching to go and learn and attend a workshop when we're able to attend workshops again. So for the parents that are listening, encourage your teacher to take advantage of these opportunities because it's going to cause a direct result having a better teacher for your own child.
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah. I think in every professional field, there are organizations that help upgrade the level of professionalism in that
yes,
particular field. But
yes.
we in the music profession have such wonderful organizations, all the way from the local level to the
Hmm.
state level to the national level. And the conferences are just fabulous. I mean, I go to some of these national conferences and I can't believe how fortunate I am to hear these people present and speak. Wonderful people.
That's how
So,
I feel right now, Mr. Blickenstaff. In fact, I have been able to hear you. I was able to go to the National Conference on Keyboard Pedagogy back in 2015, and
yeah,
I saw you there. And then maybe it was that same year or the next fall, you came to Texas, to Nacogdoches, Stephen F. Austin, and you
yeah,
presented the Bergmuller. I'm sorry, what I don't remember specifically which one, but it was a all-day workshop. You were teaching how to teach these Bergmuller pieces. And somehow in the course of those two meetings, you explained or shared with us what you call shaping the sound and your rules of thumb. And if you don't mind, I'd like to shift the conversation that direction a little bit and to maybe set this up for parents that are listening. You and I were talking just a minute ago that there is so much information on a piece of music. You have notation, you have rhythm, you have expressive marks, you have the tempo markings and the dynamics. There is a ton of information to decipher, but even that is not really enough. And you have almost, I guess, some unwritten rules. And I've asked you to maybe share a few of those with us today. So I don't know how you want to start that. Maybe you can start by me stopping to, I'll stop talking.
yeah. Now, when you think over your teaching and the things that you tell your students, you realize that you're saying the same things many, many times.
Yes.
And it's not necessarily that the students are inattentive, it's that these are basic musical principles that need reinforcement almost in every piece and with every student. And it is a wonderful day when the students assimilate those ideas and integrate them into their own playing.
Yes.
Now, we assume that students will learn to read the right notes and play the right rhythm. But music is a lot more than playing the right notes and playing the right rhythm. Music is basically expressive sound.
Mm.
The reason for music's existence is to express who we are as human beings and the feelings that we have as we go through life's journey. That's what music is.
Yeah.
And so if I sit down at the piano and I just play a basic 5-finger pattern or play a piece with a very dull sound, in a way that doesn't even meet the standard of being music
Right.
because it's not expressing anything.
Right.
So these rules of thumb that I sometimes give to piano teachers and that I am constantly talking to my students about, they deal exclusively with how we shape sound so that the sound is more expressive. See, I maintain that if you play a series of notes and they're all exactly the same, that's not very expressive, unless it's expressive of boredom or dullness or something like that.
Right. It's very mechanical.
Yeah, exactly. So it's got to be, there's something that has to happen with the dynamics of the sound. So the rules of thumb have a lot to do with dynamics. And one of the things I'm constantly talking to my students about, and this is really difficult for a student to bring off, but at least it gets their mind and their ear going, and that is that no two notes in a row may sound exactly alike. Because if they're alike, they're not doing anything.
Yes.
And so a series of notes must get louder or must get quieter, must get faster or slower or something. And the composers really make that very clear. It's just that in the students' work, they're so focused on playing the correct note at the correct time that they don't do anything with the sound.
Yes.
So one of the things that I try to emphasize with my students all the time is that no two notes is exactly alike. And that is especially true of repeated notes. If I play, and now that's really not very musical.
Right.
Because even those first chords, even though Burgmüller wrote those as 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, because it's organized in 3/4 time, Burgmüller wants 1 to be louder than 2 or 3 to give that impulse of yep. So now none of those notes is exactly alike. And now we're already on the bandwagon of making music. Okay?
Yes. Yes.
So there's no end to the exploration about that principle that the sound must be doing something. It basically is either getting louder or getting quieter. Okay.
Wonderful.
So that's another one of my little rules of thumb that I work with all my students all the time on is that when a composer writes a phrase, it might be just two notes that are slurred together.
Mm-hmm.
But there are two things about that. The last note of a group is always the quietest. And after that last note, you take a breath. Okay?
Okay.
So now the smallest example of that would be a two-note phrase. If I go, so the second note is quieter than the first, and there's a breath or a break between those little phrases. So I get my students to look at the phrase marks in their music, and a lot of times I'll say, well, would you please take your pencil and mark in a check mark at the end of the phrase where you're going to take a breath. And then we listen to see that the last note of that group is the quietest. So those are some very basic things about shaping the sound. A lot of times the students have difficulty deciding here's a 2-measure phrase or here's a 4-measure phrase, and where is the focus of that phrase. Now, it's really not fair to put every composer in a little box and say when he writes a 2-measure phrase, this is how you do it, because composers are more original than that. But But if you were really to do a complete survey of all the piano literature and could take all the 2-measure phrases that composers write, you would find overwhelmingly that the focus of a 2-measure phrase is on the downbeat of the second measure. So the composer gets the sound going a little bit, focuses on the downbeat of the second measure, tapers off, and we've got a nice shape.
Yes.
Somewhat similarly, but expanded, is a 4-measure phrase. And when composers write 4-measure phrases, once again, your research would show that out of a 4-measure phrase, the focus is invariably in the 3rd measure. I even have my students chant a little with me, out of 4, go for 3. Out of 4 measures, you're going to go for the 3rd measure.
Yes.
And you'll find that so helpful because it gives the students a plan for the shaping of the sound. And if the sound is shaped, it has expression.
Yes.
All of this goes back to the fact that we want our music to be expressive. And if it's not, we are not living up to the mandate that music must express our feelings, our emotions.
Yes. Yes.
So, so those are things. Yeah.
So you wouldn't necessarily, one thing that I aim for is maybe the highest note of a phrase, but that's not necessarily
No,
so.
no, no. Composers are too smart for that. Yeah. Composers are too smart for that, and they don't want to be boxed in with some rule. And actually, there's another thought that may come closer to be true than the highest note, and that is the longest note. That's another rule that I give to my students. That's in our little rules of thumb, and that is short notes go to long notes. Now that is a musical truism, because composers over the ages have found that the shorter values, the shorter rhythmic values, make the sound move forward. And so if they're trying to get the sound to go to the goal of a phrase, they'll use shorter notes to get there, and the goal will be then on a longer note. Short notes go to long notes.
That is a rule that I have used tons. I have used your document a lot, but that's the one, especially for students that just start learning about eighth notes and they
Yeah,
want to think of a pair of eighth notes as a single unit. And no,
yeah,
it's connected to the
yeah,
quarter note or whatever comes
yeah.
after,
That's right. That's right. Yeah,
which it makes sense with our language. I mean, you said composers over the ages. Ages was your emphasis. And so
that,
over the got you to
that's right.
ages.
Exactly. Exactly. No, those are some things. It's obvious that a student who's coming into piano lesson, they don't know these things,
Right.
and so that's part of our mandate, is to give students tools for interpretation. And that's where those rules of thumb come from. Basically, it comes from my experience of teaching years and years and years of piano and saying the same thing over and over and over and over, because I think it's true, it's true, it's true, it's true.
Yes.
That and so that becomes part of a piano student's toolbox. These are the things that we do as musicians to shape the sound. Why do we shape the sound? To express emotion. Why do we express emotion? That's what music is.
Yes.
Music exists to show us what it's like to be a human being, the
Mhm.
feelings that we have. And what a privilege that is. My wife was a psychiatric therapist, and she would point out that people who do not have avenues to express feelings become very sick people.
Mm.
And we're doing our children a tremendous service when we talk with them about the feeling that they're expressing and having them align a feeling that they have with a sound that they're creating. So, in a way, I've never said this before, but in a way, I almost think we're in the mental health profession, because we're helping students to become more sensitive, expressive human beings.
Yes, and providing them with an outlet to be able to work through their own emotions. They
Yeah,
don't have to keep things bottled in, and that's so timely for the days that we're living right
yeah.
now.
No, and if I were to have one message for piano teachers, I think it would be that we are not serving our students best if we don't put that message first and foremost in every lesson, that the purpose of music is to express who we are as human beings.
Amen.
End of
And so, piano parents who are listening, in my view, they are the ones that are just in the trenches. Piano teachers, we get to see our students for a short time of a short amount of time, once a week or whatever our schedule is, but that time in between lessons is
Yeah,
so vital, and
yeah,
that is where piano parents are such a big component to the success of a piano
absolutely.
student.
Yeah,
So they may or may not be very musical, they may not know these things, but they are still expressive human beings. They can still listen to the emotion that the music is conveying.
a number of years ago, the great piano pedagogue Francis Clark talked about the magic triangle,
Mm.
the magic triangle of piano study. And she said on one side of the triangle is a student, another side is the teacher, but a very important third side that builds the strong geometric form are the parents. And boy, I tell you, I can't do the job I need to do without my parents.
Yes.
And as you suggest, parents don't necessarily have musical backgrounds, etc., but there are a few things that they can help us with tremendously, and that is that they discipline the child to practice daily, that they try to supervise the practice to the point that they see that the practice covers the entire assignment daily,
Mm.
and that the students understand the assignment. So the first practice session after a lesson, the parent really should go over the assignment with its style to determine if everything is understandable in the lesson. Do you know what page this is on? Do you know what section you're supposed to be working on? Are you to practice hands separately or hands together, etc., etc.?
Mm.
And if there are questions, then you shoot off a fast email to the teacher and say, we don't understand what we're supposed to do with the Kulau Sonatina.
Right.
And I know parents are very, very busy people, but we can't do it without that. And students will have a tendency, without the parent supervision, to simply practice on the things that are easy for them,
Yes.
or are most pleasant for them, and they'll forget to get out the etude book and work on their finger exercises, or they won't warm up properly, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
So parents really need to supervise the practice to the extent that they see that the assignment is actually covered every day. Yeah, all of us as adults realize that we can accomplish very little if we just do it in kicks and starts. We need to practice regularly.
Yes.
And there will be no progress made on any piece if it's only touched a couple times a week. It has to be repeatedly. Yeah, I think one of the things that teachers try to get across to their students, and one of the things that parents can really help reinforce, is that you only accomplish something through repetition. And in piano playing, that's especially true because what we're trying to do is learn muscle patterns that the fingers go through.
Yes.
Once over lightly will never teach that skill or that routine. It's got to be repeated over and over and over.
And I would add, if you don't spend the time learning the piece, then you're going to constantly be stuck at that foundational level of notes and rhythms, and you're never going to get to the icing on the cake with the expressiveness.
Exactly. That's a very good point.
Do you have any other rules of thumb to share with us? You've mentioned some rhythm things. What about harmony?
Oh, yeah. Composers write different chords. Because they have different degrees of tension. The chord that's built on the first note of the scale always is home bass, and that is relaxed.
Mm.
Anything that moves away from that has more tension and desires desperately to come back home.
Yes.
So it's a lot of children's pieces basically they revolve between tonic and dominant and tonic. And the rule there is that a dominant is always louder than the tonic. So anything that goes away from this is louder than this.
Yes.
Yeah. So you look in your music for the colorful sounds, and you bring those out.
I love how you describe that as the home base and the home sound, and then you go away from home.
Yeah.
You have such a beautiful way of describing sounds that make it imaginative for me as a teacher, and certainly students. I've seen videos on YouTube or whatever of you working with students, and you just, well, first of all, you just have this, I hope this is a compliment. I intend it as a compliment, but you
I'll
have
take it.
you have this warm grandfatherly wisdom, but with gentle emotion to express that to a student. And I'm so jealous of students that are sitting listening to you explain things to them. But I just love the artistry that you use to describe these abstract concepts.
I don't find it difficult to have profound respect for my students. My students are wonderful young human beings. We're learning together, but they are just beautiful, beautiful human beings. And to be upset or angry or something like that, that's uncalled for.
Right.
They may miss a note, but that doesn't mean that they are not still that precious human being. So I think that's the background for the way I relate to my students, is that I respect and really love them very much. And so we're working together on making some beautiful sounds and building their technique, etc. Now I find it, I sometimes get a little bit impatient with the fact that a student doesn't work out a problem at home week after week after week. And we spend time in the lesson, and I think we got it solved, but they don't follow through at home sometimes, and so that's a little bit of an issue. But that's just the short view. Of the long view is that we have a relationship. And that relationship is going to go on for years and years. I still get cards and notes from students whom I haven't seen for 20 years. And that relationship is still an ongoing thing. And that is because there's a mutual respect and love of one another.
Absolutely. And I kind of keep going back to the times that we're in, just because we're in them right now. But what a beautiful gift for a parent to give to their child, to have another loving adult in their child's life. And as teachers, we have the luxury of having that one-on-one time with a child that maybe their parents don't even get, if there are siblings or other family members. So we have a true treasure, and for a parent to give that gift to their child is a beautiful thing, whether they ever pursue long-term piano playing or not. You mentioned that we are actually in a type of mental health business, and I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Yeah. I think one of the main messages of life is that we are here together to love and support one another. And that is so true of a teacher and a student.
Yes.
It is not my job to tear down that student and make them feel incapable because I have such high demands, or art is such a sacred thing, or something like that. No, my job, my primary job with the student is to be an adult who says, I affirm you as a human being. You are a beautiful young human being with infinite potential. Now let's see what we can do through our relationship to make beautiful music.
Yes, that is so good. I almost want to stop there, but I'm not quite ready to stop. However, I do want to be aware of your time. I appreciate you so much, Marvin. I hate calling you Marvin. I want to call you
Mr. Come on.
No, Mr. Blickenstaff, out of utmost respect.
No, I'm Marvin. I'm Marvin.
Was there anything, I hate to condense that. I'm sure there are massive amounts of rules of thumb, but I'm just looking at the list that I have of your document that you sent, and you've talked about rhythm. Just to reiterate, short sounds go to long
Yeah.
sounds, and you said no. Let's see, no two notes should sound the same, even repeated notes. We talked a little bit about harmony. You in your document, you say stress the unusual and
Yeah, yeah.
de-emphasize or relax the predictable. You under harmony, you also say harmonic considerations are more powerful than either melodic or rhythmic ones. Look to the harmony first.
I think that's something that piano teachers overlook so readily because it's not sort of spelled out graphically in the score. But when push comes to shove, it is really the harmony that stimulates the music. It's the harmony that underlines the expressive element of the music. And we don't do enough with that. I think piano teachers fail rather consistently in getting their students to name the chords that are in their pieces so that they become more aware of that. Students will struggle and to get the right black keys in a chord. It'd be so much easier for the student to get that chord if we'd say, but what's the name of that chord? Oh, it's an A flat chord. Well, you know an A flat chord.
Yes.
Anyway,
Yes.
but we as teachers do not guide our students carefully enough to respect the color and the beauty that the harmony gives to our music. So we count the rhythms, and we get the right fingerings and we keep shouting, well, that was supposed to be a staccato and something like
Yes.
that. And we don't realize that A flat is really a purple moment in the music.
You have to talk more about that. What do you mean, purple?
Oh, I'm sure you know exactly what I mean. No, you could take almost any piece of music and stop and think and say, but what was the most beautiful moment? What was the aha moment? And those are the purple moments. Yeah.
Wonderful. I've
Yeah.
never heard it expressed like that. I'm going to have
Yeah.
to start digging through some of my music and find some purple.
There's another thing that I think piano teachers don't do well enough. There is no question but what, as far as harmony is concerned, almost every piece, once again, you could do a research on the complete piano repertoire up until the 20th century. But in traditional harmonic practices, composers invariably will put the high point of the piece, and usually it's in the last couple phrases, the high point of the piece on a tonic chord in second inversion. We call it a 1-6-4 chord.
Yes.
The five of the key is in the bass,
Yes.
harmonized.
Yes.
And students don't get that. My students, actually, there was a time in my teaching that I had a special colored pencil. It was amber. And that was reserved exclusively for circling of tonic 6-4 chords because they are invariably the harmonic high point of the phrase. High point meaning greatest intensity
Yes.
of the phrase. That's
Yes.
really important. So our students need to name their chords more. They need to look for it. They get their pencils out and they look for the 1-6-4 chords. But as I say, your research of the piano literature will reveal that composers focus, they put their big moment, the big climax of the piece on the 1-6-4 chord.
And what an interesting exercise for a student to do to go hunting for those 1-6-4 chords.
Well, I'll tell you also, every piano teacher has their students going, and I have my students do those cadence patterns, but we do it this way. So they play a single bass line. That
Yes.
top note actually is going to be harmonized as a 1-6-4 chord.
Yes.
I'll go back to C major. I'm C major. Here's 4. Now I'm going to play a 1 chord in my right hand, but the 5th degree,
Yes.
so that's a 1 chord in second inversion.
Yes.
And resolve. Okay. So the students play that and they get that in their ear and they say, oh, there's the harmonic high point and then They get
Yes.
that in their ear.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. Let's see, you've talked about melody. The last note of the group is the
Yeah.
quietest. I'm conflicted. I want to just keep talking to you, but I know we need to wrap up. I will finish with this. One of my favorite rules that you have, I'm looking for where you have it listed. Where is it? When in doubt. Oh, there it is.
Oh,
Under melody. When in doubt, swell.
Uh, that came years ago from the fact that when students play sonatinas, lots of times the scale passages seem to just kind of go on, and you can't necessarily say that when notes go up they get louder and that kind of thing. But there still has to be some kind of dynamic event going on. And I find that very helpful that when you don't really know what to do with your dynamics, make it grow because
Yes.
that's very interesting to listen to and it's exciting and you'll find a place then to taper that off. So when in doubt, swell.
And that's just swell. I love
That's
that.
just swell.
Marvin, thank you so much for allowing me to be your student for this time period. I appreciate it. And
It's,
I think it's going to be so good for parents to get a better understanding of the nuances and the layers of music, the layers of expression, and they can help their piano kids spend the time to get to know those notes and rhythms so then they can get to the good stuff.
okay. Well, I appreciate this time very, very much. Thank you for contacting me and let's do it again sometime.
Absolutely. That sounds wonderful. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Have a great day.
You too.